1. I, too, knew a Kevin, and in fact ended up living with him for 2 years in college. We were moving off campus and needed another person to split rent for a house. My friends knew him and said he was a good guy, but forgot to mention his Kevinness. Below were just a handful of things he did that made my eyes pop out of my head. First and foremost, Kevin's rent was late every single month. At first, I would talk to him about it every month. He told me it was late because his mom had to send him a check because he didn't have a bank account. In fact, after 6 months of this, we told him we weren't going to cover his late rent anymore. So we asked what we should tell the landlord. He just shrugged. I had met his mom and she seemed nice enough. After a year, I finally had to give her a call. It was late every month because Kevin had established the system to call her after rent was due and ask her to send money, which was about the same rent for every month, and I gave 3 weeks' notice on. Once I talked to her, it was largely resolved. One of my other roommates, who was in charge of community groceries and supplies, think toilet paper, also would cook dinners, which you could opt in or out on. He was always super clear on how much it was, and how much it was to opt in for dinner on different nights, very cheap. After racking up a large debt and my roommate hounding Kevin for payment, I had to get involved and ask what was up. Kevin told us he thought that we paid for groceries and supplies using house money. I tried to get him to elaborate, and he basically thought we had this fictional bank account where we had unlimited resources. To this day, I think he thought his rent of less than $220 a month was just going in my bank account. Prior to moving in, we gave him the job of setting up the internet. His mom, of course, paid for it, and we paid him about $9 each a month, which I took off his rent since I was in charge of that. One month, Kevin was hounding me to give him $9 to give his mom. I informed him that since he was late on rent, I would certainly not be giving him $9, which again I already took off his rent each month. He kept getting more angry, and I had to explain basic addition and subtraction to him. I was using a scrap of bread and a whole slice to make the point visually, and I shit you not, he said, "You want me to repay you in bread?" My other roommate overheard this whole conversation and freaked out. I eventually just paid him all 2 years' coverage of internet at once, so it was no longer an issue. We lived in a not-so-great neighborhood, in a very cold climate. On 5 different occasions in our first year living there, my roommates or I came home to our front door being just wide open. Not only was the house freezing and snowy inside, but we would be worried our stuff was gone or someone in the house thankfully never was. When it first happened, Kevin told us he just forgot to shut and lock the door behind him. Fine, mistakes happen. But it kept happening, and every time we explained why it was a big deal, I actually saw Kevin do it once, and yes, he just walked out and didn't even look behind him. We finally told him if it happened a 6th time, we would charge him more for the heating bill. He did stop doing this after getting yelled at. Last story I will share. Kevin was awful at cleaning and was shit at doing his share of chores. We had a rotating list, and whenever he cleaned the kitchen, he would vacuum the floor. Now, I never chose to fight this battle in the first 6 months of living there, because there were bigger fish. My boyfriend, who also lived with us, finally saw him do it one day and decided to help him out and brought him a broom. Kevin insisted that it wouldn't work. After my boyfriend demonstrated, Kevin was absolutely amazed and began sweeping. Fast forward a month to the next time he cleaned. My boyfriend witnessed him walk up to the kitchen table and sweep the table with the broom he used on our nasty basement floor. All of us were in shock and told him to clean it with soap, and Kevin couldn't understand the big deal. He never really cleaned again after that. All in all, he was a nice enough guy with a big heart, but he was an absolute Kevin. After I graduated, I have no idea what happened to the kid, but I heard he finally graduated somehow, although when I was there, he never declared a major. So he must have survived, but man, that was a long 2 years. 2. So for approximately 2 months, I worked with this guy, and at the time it was frustrating. But now all I can do is laugh and be amazed at how this person has gotten through life. Little background of my work. I work in a warehouse for cheese, not with cheese. It involves a lot of heavy lifting, moving pallets around, and finding products and writing down numbers before sending them out upon request. So on to this Kevin. For over a month, he thought that the giant reels of plastic and rolls of labels were cheese. They literally have a cardboard tube in the middle of them and don't get refrigerated. In addition to that, he used to help me unwind some of them every day. He would pick up heavy products, like some over 15 kilograms, and struggle to do a full 360-degree turn before putting it down in a new spot. When it was brought to his attention by health and safety, he didn't understand and would drop everything unless he did the 360 spin. They literally had to walk him around and start with the lightest products and build up to teach him how to lift things safely. In my job, we use pallet trucks to wash pallets around. The pallets we use are not square, they are rectangular, and the way we lay out our warehouse means that pallets need to be a certain way around to fit into the bays next to other pallets. If you try to push them around from the side, they are too wide to fit. After 6 weeks of explaining this every day to Kevin, it finally broke him. He had a full-scale anger rage at trying to get a pallet in a gap. He was shouting, pushing it, and getting super angry. I walked over and told him he needed to turn it around. He got super angry at me and told me it was the right way around and that I was trying to get him to do an impossible task. I got pissed off too, took over, turned it around, and got it in first try. He would break multiple pallets a day by incorrectly using the pallet truck. If you push the pallet truck fully into the side of the pallet and lift it, you will snap the pallet. When I confronted him about it, he would deny it was him. Apart from me, he was the only person working in that room, and they were not broken in the time I got them from the lorry and put them on the bay with the forklift. Another time, he got angry trying to push a pallet through the doorway and accused me of not helping him when the pallet was super heavy. He was pushing it into the door frame. In my job, we use walkie-talkie style radios. Pretty simple, press a button, talk, release a button. After 6 weeks, Kevin still could not work out that you need to hold the button to talk. So we often have some pre-picked items, set ready to go when needed. There was a time when someone requested a product and Kevin sent it out. Well, he sent the wrong product. He then proceeded to argue with the person that he sent the right product down because he had written so on the paperwork. I then sent more of the product because sometimes they need more, and maybe everyone was just getting confused. That happens often too. I then walked to the pre-picked area and find the stack of products Kevin had sent. My boss then gets involved and told him that he needs to find out what product he had sent because it's important for legal reasons. So usually when this sort of accident happens, we can go and check the areas where the products are kept. And it's pretty easy to work it out because they are not being used. But Kevin decides the way he'll figure it out is by reading over the list of products on the sheet for 10 plus minutes, and then go and look at the unpicked stock in the storage room. Yeah, he never did work that out, and it was another time I went to the rescue. We often have to stack products onto trolleys with 4 rotating wheels and no handles, then wrap them up in cling film. It's not a difficult job, and even though I explained to him you need to stack them 4 by 7, he didn't listen and stacked them 6 by 12, but not once. My boss found out, told him to redo it, and even showed him how to do it. Kevin then restacks all the product onto another trolley, but stacks it completely the same 6 by 12. When I saw, unknowing that my boss had already told him, I came to him explaining to him that he needed to restack it because it was dangerous and not what I asked. He got really angry at me and said it was right and he didn't understand. So I did it with him. The next day he goes and restacks them again at 6 by 12. Like I said, We also have to cling wrap these trolleys. And as I said, they have rotating wheels. So normally when you wrap them, you have to use something to keep the wheels from moving so the trolley doesn't move. Kevin was trying to pallet wrap the trolley without blocking the wheels. I watched him walk in a circle with the trolley moving over 5 times without realizing it wasn't wrapping and getting annoyed. Honestly, the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. He was on the road to being fired, but he ended up quitting. However, he was telling everyone he got fired. He should be fine. He is signed up with over 9 agencies who can't seem to give him jobs he can keep. Yikes. I do hope the best for him. He seemed like a nice guy, but honestly, I have never in my life met anyone like this person. Another thing that came to mind I forgot to include. We have these guides which explain which numbers need to be recorded, for example, lot number batch codes. It is basically photos of old labels with circled information. I gave these to Kevin and explained to him they are guides. When an item was requested, he started copying the numbers straight from the guides instead of the numbers on the labels. When I tried to educate him about it, he did not understand what he was doing wrong and accused me of telling him to write numbers from the guide down. Even when I stood there and pointed at the example guide and the different number on the product labels, he did not understand. So I had to take the guides away and hide them. These guides are written simple enough for non-English speakers to understand them. 3. Probably I am just unlucky to get so many dumbasses on my way. Or somehow I've developed the worst superpower in history, a magnetic field that only attracts dimwits. Or maybe there's so many of them one just can't help but bump into the molasses for brains everywhere. I don't know. Kevins are everywhere. They are legion. Background. I've worked for a short time in a busy chain restaurant in the middle of London, and resigned when my Kevin tolerance reached its limit. Head chef was this kid, about 25. Not that that would be a bad sign per se. I've done a cooking course under a 22-year-old chef who was a natural talent and a genius. This guy, 1 year earlier, was working as a runner, had no experience, and as it came out later, no formal knowledge or training. He did work hard, but was not smart. Kitchen had an incredibly high turnover rate. Staff was coming and going on average of at least 1 change a week. Either someone resigning or someone else coming in. Not a good sign. Now down to the Kevinalities. Head Kevin has no fucking clue about organization, teamwork, or task distribution. Basically, it was everyone for himself. An example. You have 3 burgers with sweet potato fries on the ticket. One with cheddar cheese and bacon, the others with red Leicester and onion ring. A good kitchen team of 3 gets one to grill the burgers and drop the fries, another to cut, toast and prepare the bread with lettuce, tomato and whatnot. And the third one on the pass to handle the rest, warming the plates under the pass lights, preparing the sauce pots, garnish and so on. Check everything and sending the food to the customers. This kitchen worked on you get the ticket, you handle it from start to finish, resulting in chefs tripping all over each other, dishes prepared twice or not at all, traffic jams on the counter, and no final quality control. Both head Kevin and second Kevin, they were actually housemates, had no idea what cross-contamination was, and to this day I'm fairly certain they both faked their online courses on health and safety. Once, second Kevin had to prepare some bacon strips. He grabbed the bag of uncooked bacon, laid it on the pass. First goddamn huge fucking mistake, raw meat on the counter where you assemble the dish you're sending to the customer. Took a brown cutting board, the one that's color-coded to be used exclusively for stuff like onions, raw potatoes and such. A yellow knife, aka the one color-coded to be used exclusively for cooked meat. And starts chopping. One of the floor managers comes in, sees that, his face goes white, takes everything from under second Kevin, moves the proper red-colored board and knife on the counter in the raw prep area, and drops the rest in the dishwasher straight away. Second Kevin gets upset, cause he didn't understand what was wrong. They used to prepare coleslaw from scratch using the sink as a mixing bowl. the sink reserved for washing vegetables, mainly potatoes. More often than not, even without bothering cleaning it beforehand. Most boroughs have their own rules for garbage collection. Some sell pre-taxed bags and only collect rubbish that's been packed in them. This was one of them. Big Kev, the manager, didn't buy the rubbish bags once for whatever reason, so we couldn't put the garbage out for collection. For 2 fucking weeks. Genius idea. Let's hide it all in the basement. An average of 4 large bags per day full of leftover food, flour, vegetable trimmings, chicken bones, eggshells, stale bread, festering in a basement for 2 weeks. Speaking of Big Kev, I've heard through the grapevine that he was originally training as a general manager elsewhere. Then all of a sudden he got transferred and demoted to simple waiter, until a friend of his, the one who hired him in the first place, a middle-level manager, stepped in and reinstated him as manager in training. What happened I can't know, but I guess some serious shit has been going on. Maybe theft or dealing. Company probably didn't have a definitive proof for firing him and opted for demotion. Head Kevin, tomorrow's the busiest day of the week. Let's just put 2 of them on shift and make one of them the new kitchen porter, literally as his first job experience that we hired 3 days ago. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. Guess what? The chef resigned the very same evening. And then Head Kevin did that again. Oven had a self-cleaning cycle, but it needed some chemicals, of course. 2 blue bags and a red bag, coming in conveniently in one delivery. They ran out of red bags because all the Kevins were just dropping 3 bags of whatever was closest to grab. We had a blast chiller with an additional defrost functionality. Of course, none of the Kevins ever actually bothered to learn what it was, what was its purpose, and how to use it. They were using it as a spare fridge or to cool down preps before the walk-in fridge. Or so they thought. They never realized it was set on defrost all the time, keeping all that food in a nice, comfortable temperature range for bacteria to reproduce like crazy. Or to quote Chef Ramsay, "You're trying to kill someone, you fucking donkeys." 4. So, I went to high school with a Kevin, as most of us did. Most of us went to high school with a staggering number of Kevins. But our school was very tiny, 120 people including staff. And this particular Kevin's antics would spread across the school at near light speed. We all eagerly awaited the inevitable, "God damn it, Kevin," from day to day. I'll give some smaller examples before the main Kevinsode here. Kevin would habitually lean on the back of 2 legs of his chair despite falling violently almost every single time he did it. Kevin got his phone taken away nearly 24 times in a 4-week span in the same class. He sat directly in front of the teacher and never tried to hide his phone or even put it on silent. Kevin never bought his own cigarettes, but he sure liked to smoke everyone else's. He couldn't fathom why everyone avoided him during lunch and wouldn't bum him smokes every goddamn day. Jesus Christ, I'm still mad about that one every damn day. Kevin once meowed at a teacher for an entire class period. Yes, meowed. Meow. Like a cat. He was baffled as to why he was kicked out of said class. Not once, not twice, but 3 fucking times, Kevin put a cup of noodles in the microwave without water in it. He started a fire each time. The smell was indescribable. And he got the student lounge taken away from all of us. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks a lot, bud. There are many more examples, but I'd have to hit up my former classmates for those. It's been a few years. Anyway, here's the main event. Kevin, by no laws of God or man, should ever have been allowed behind the wheel of a vehicle, any larger or faster than a big wheel. I can't even count the number of accidents he had, big and small, and it's a miracle he made it to 17 years old. He's still kicking now, don't worry. Naturally, his parents bought him a shiny new sports car, what every teenage dingus deserves. One morning on his way to school, Kevin came frighteningly close to killing a fellow student who was riding on his scooter on the sidewalk. He didn't even realize he'd hit him and kept driving. Thankfully, the kid wasn't badly hurt at all, and nothing lengthy and legal came out of it. Unfortunately, this was something of a regular occurrence for Kevin. The second he got in his car, every other student was in immediate danger, and a couple more minor accidents happened. Kevin should not drive. Now, I mentioned our school was small, and that meant most of us had very close relationships with our absolutely amazing teachers. Even Kevin. We could speak very openly and frankly with them, and they would do the same in turn. So I'm walking back from lunch one day, and I see Kevin speaking with one of our teachers, and it looks very intense. I hadn't seen Kevin at lunch trying to bum cigarettes from everyone, and apparently he was in some deep shit. As I get closer, I can hear the conversation. "Kevin, if you don't pull your head out of your ass, you're going to kill one of these kids, or yourself. At the very least, you'll lose your license. Get it together."
"I'm a good driver, though, I swear."
"I'm sure you are, buddy, but if you can't stop dicking around long enough to look in the rear view or, God forbid, out of the windshield, bad shit is going to happen. You're lucky it hasn't yet. I'm just asking you to pay attention, Kevin. Can you do that for me? Just open your eyes a little wider or something."
"Yes, sir. I'm sorry." "I know."
"All right, now go get yourself some lunch, buddy. I'll tell your next period why you're late coming back. You're smarter than they give you credit for, Kevin. You just have to prove it." Scooter Kid is sitting 10 feet away, barely stifling laughter. Kevin slowly mopes his way out of the front door. I wait a minute and approach the teacher to try and get more details out of him, but before I can, the front door bursts open and another student comes in screaming,
"Kevin almost ran me over just now. Someone needs to take his damn car away."
At most, 2 minutes had elapsed since the end of Kevin's conversation with the teacher. I have never seen a man leap into action so fast and with so much anger. This teacher was a former LA police officer in the late 80s. He did not fuck around. Kevin's head was about to roll. By the time I got outside, it was mostly over, but apparently Mr. Teacher Man stopped Kevin from leaving the parking lot, pulled him from the car, put him in some kind of arm bar, and was currently tearing him a new asshole and pouring vinegar in with words I only wish I could remember. It was incredible. While I agree that a teacher should never touch a student like that, I think this case might be something of an exception. Kevin was seriously going to kill someone someday. Not much changed for the rest of Kevin's high school career. He drove a little slower for sure, he had perfect attendance, somehow graduated just before I did, and I didn't hear much about him after that. Until maybe a year ago, a Facebook post pops up. Kevin, sweet, simple, lethal behind the wheel Kevin, is now a licensed airplane pilot. He flies all the damn time. Keep an eye in the skies, friends, especially if you're on a scooter. 5. So this happened quite a few years ago to me, but on recent conversation I remembered about it and thought it would be funny to share. My wife's dad's side of the family is filled with the most entitled and brown-nosed people you can think of. They all think they are better than everyone else, even though they really are not, and, well, we usually don't confront them about it because it just leads to fights, escalation, and things like that. Back when my wife was at the hospital to undergo a surgery, I spent a few days at my father-in-law's sister's house. Now, this woman is something else. She is extremely condescending, thinks that her job is the job because she works at the city hall, even though her job isn't that big of a deal. I think she's some sort of glorified secretary or something. Constantly makes up gossip and fakes tales of gossip around town just to see other people's suffering, and is a terrible mother. I could go on for hours about her, but this particular tale isn't about her, oh no. It's about her husband, Kevin. Kevin is a moron, but he's a moron that thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He will say the most ridiculous things you can imagine, and if you try to talk back or tell him he is wrong, he will throw a fit and rant for hours about how he is right about it, and all these facts that he knows and you don't. And if you say something like, "But there's nowhere speaking about this," then he will claim that he won because, "See,
If you can't find it, it's because you don't know how to research it right.
He also has this gambling problem where he spends a load of money on online auctions for broken trucks. Not that he ever repairs them or does anything. He just buys them and leaves them in his backyard to rot. One time I was told by my mother-in-law that he spent over $20,000 on an old truck that only had the metal frame and wheels intact. He claimed that,
"I can build a 2-floor mobile house with this."
And to my knowledge, he has never even begun sketching the plans for it. Another thing is that he works as a mason, but he is terrible at it. He never takes measurements, lays down foundations or anything. He just pours cement, lays the bricks, and done. If it stands, then it stands. If it doesn't, then it's the client's fault for messing with it. My father-in-law told me about one time where they were working on a house, and Kevin placed the windows and used small wires to hold them in place. Now that you know a bit more about this individual, we can move on to the time when I had my first interaction with the guy. I'm from Brazil, more specifically Rio de Janeiro, and I moved to the rural side of Sao Paulo to live with my wife. Like I said, she had to undergo surgery, and I spent a few days in my father-in-law's sister's, for convenience sake, let's call her Karen's house, because it was closer to the hospital to visit my wife since I couldn't stay in the hospital since it wasn't allowed. One day we all had dinner together. Karen had made some cassava manioc. Seriously, America, what the hell is this name? And we were all eating at the dinner room. Kevin asked me where I was from, and I said Rio de Janeiro. It was my first year there. They still didn't know me that well. And I thought that was that. He would ask me about the beaches, landscapes, things like that. Then he turned to me and said,
"So which factory did you live in?"
To which I had to pause for a second to process it. I turned to him and said, "What?" And then the following conversation happened.
"Yes, in which factory you used to live in? After all, Rio de Janeiro is this giant factory complex."
Me, assuming this was some sort of joke, chuckled and said, "Well, I'm from," and I told him where I was from.
"I never heard of it. What do they produce?"
"I'm sorry."
What product do they produce? You know, like chairs or tables or car parts?"
He said that in an extremely patronizing tone of voice to me, which did make me feel a bit insulted, but I just continued to tag along. None of those things. I lived in a condo and Kevin cut me off.
"As if. I know that state. It's all just factories and mechanical constructions. I've been there before, you know, so I know exactly all about it. But I get it. You must still be having a hard time getting adjusted to Sao Paulo, since it's so different from your old factory. After all, here we plant what we eat. We have rural zones and farms to grow our crops, and animals, unlike Rio, which just buys everything processed and packaged from us. You'll see how much more healthy we are. For example, I bet you never had this soup before, because over on Rio it's all just processed and pre-packaged food. Here we use our stoves to cook. If you want, I can show you what oranges are and how we grow them. It comes from trees."
So yeah, this guy honestly believed that Rio de Janeiro has nothing but factories as far as the eyes could see, and that we all lived and worked in them. I was honestly expecting this guy to turn to me and ask if I was a robot too. Well, after that last sentence from him, I had to bite my lip hard to not burst out in laughter after hearing so much nonsense. But I wanted to know how far it would go, so I turned and said, "All right then, what about our beaches and the Cristo Redentor?" And then Kevin said what was the last straw for me. With an annoyed grunt and a roll of his eyes for real, he said this:
"Oh, come on. Everybody knows that statue was just a fabricated myth. It never existed, and you just say that to make us believe you're like us. Honestly, I find it quite low you'd use the saint name of Jesus in such a lie, but what could I expect from a state filled with people that do not have faith in God?"
I couldn't hold on any longer and just burst out in pure laughter. I had a cramp from laughing so much, and had to excuse myself outside to stop myself. I was in tears, I laughed so much. The next day I went to visit my wife in the hospital, and told both her and my in-laws about that encounter, and we had the laugh of the century. Especially since my mother-in-law told me Karen called her, telling her how disrespectful I was to her that day, and made fun of her husband, and that he was just trying to educate me. So yeah, that was my encounter with the Kevin. After that day, he never really spoke to me anymore, other than hi when we came to visit. Hope you had a good as laugh as I had that day. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to A Cacophony of Kevins, Episode 10. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do press that like button and share the video with friends and family members. Alright, we have a little birthday shout out to give today. And today's birthday shout out goes to, I had that name a second ago, Sophia. Sophia's birthday is today. I don't know how old they are. We'll keep that a secret. Shh. Right. Keep it quiet. But I hope you're having a great day today. Well, it's December 18th. Right, well then you get, say, about 2 weeks to celebrate your birthday, as we are letting everyone celebrate their birthdays for the rest of the month. Because apparently I'm the self-appointed king of birthdays these days. I should get a crown. I should get a crown. Anyway, before we go, I'd like to sing happy birthday to you, Sophia. But of course, make sure you're treating yourself and spoiling yourself for the next 2 weeks. You deserve every second of it. Alright, now I'd like to sing happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sophia. Happy birthday to you. Alrighty, and let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what is your favorite comfort item? Big thanks to my moderator Ino, Darth Ino, for supplying this question. I'm going to say, don't judge me too harshly. My favorite item that I find the most comforting is my smartphone, because I use it primarily not as a smartphone. I use it as a flashlight, I use it as a calculator, but mostly I use it for playing audiobooks. Or sometimes I'll scroll TikTok or whatever at night when I can't sleep, and it helps me fall asleep. I even have things playing as I rest, like the channel Casually Comics. I'll often have the playlists I've downloaded playing in the background. It's very soothing for me. But you might have better options. You might have more interesting options. And I very much look forward to reading your answers in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening. And take very good care of yourself.